Okay, back to the phylogeny. So we looked at the branch on the left there, which is the four groups of chondrichthyes or cartilaginous fishes that we wanted to talk about. Now we're going to move on to the branch on the right, which is the osteichthyes, which is a split between chondrichthyes and osteichthyes taking place more than 450 million years ago. Okay, so now let's take a look at the osteichthyes group. With the synapomorphy being, they have an at least partially ossified skeleton, as well as a swim bladder or a lung derived from the gut. None of the chondrichthyes had those things. And everything that's descended from here has them at least ancestrally. Now, the first major split within the osteichthyes is between the Actinopterygii and the Sarcopterygii soon after the origin of osteichthyes. So there's a split, Actinopterygii versus Sarcopterygii. These are going to be the rayed-finned fishes versus the lobe-finned fishes. Let's look at Actinopterygii first, which includes the greatest diversity of these true fishes. So let's look at the groups within Actinopterygii, all of which have these conspicuous fin elements, but the skeletal element does not extend far into the fin, which is going to be the case with Sarcopterygii like us. Okay, so let's go through those groups along the top there. There's 7 of them, or 8 of them. Let's go through them one by one. Start with Polypteriformes. These are the bikers. They're called bikers in the pet trade. They're found almost exclusively in Africa. And they are freshwater only. They have these cool little unique dorsal fin spines, this little finlets along the back there, each with an individual spine. And a special type of scale called ganoid scales. Several of these other groups will also have ganoid scales, which are these interlocking triangular scale, not triangular, these interlocking diamond-shaped scales here, which form such a strong armor that actually some people are investigating whether or not they might be good for body armor in the military or police, like a similar style. They're really cool critters, and one of your instructors in the animal diversity class, Professor Hans Larsen, actually studies them as a potential model for what life might have looked like when fish first moved out onto land. So what they did was they actually raised some of these bikers out of the water by just misting them. So because they can breathe air, as long as you keep them moist, they do fine out of water. And the idea was, if you raise them out of water, will they sort of train themselves to be better at moving around out of water? And will they have anatomical features that will aid that? Which might suggest what would have happened during the origin of the movement of fishes onto land via tetrapods. And so here's just a cool video of a polypterous individual that's been raised out of the water using its pectoral fins and undulations with those pectoral fins as supporting structures to move about on dry land. Polypterous is not the actual origin of tetrapods moving out onto land. That's in the Sarcopterygii. Okay, next major group, Accipenseroformes. These are the sturgeons and paddlefishes. These can be really big and cool fish. In the upper left is a sturgeon from the biodome. And sturgeon can get massive. They can be up to 1,300 kilograms. These guys, the really big ones, are the largest fish found in fresh water. They're not exclusively freshwater because they're anadromous. The biggest sturgeon species are the ones that do that. There are also freshwater only sturgeon that get really big, but they're not the biggest of them. Their skeleton is mostly cartilaginous. It does have ossified elements, but it's mostly cartilaginous. Paddlefishes are really cool. You see them in the upper right and in the lower left. They have this long paddle coming off the front, which has electrosensory organs, which are thought to be really good for detecting zooplankton on which they filter feed on in fresh water. Lepisosteiformes, there's only 7 species of these, and they're the gars and gar pikes found in North and Central America. You can find them in the Ottawa River and the St. Lawrence River. I've seen them near my house in the Ottawa River. And in the introductory video, right at the very end, I just sort of showed a video of one from Florida. And there it is, a Florida gar there, which I saw when I was in the Everglades, and just took a video of it hanging out. They're highly piscivorous, ambush predators. You see that they have all the fins at the back, so they do not have a high aspect ratio, Rather, they have this big flat paddle at the back, which is good for really rapid forward momentum to ambush prey that come by. So they're sit and wait predators, and then they go out and grab it with a really sharp extended jaw with these massive teeth. I did want to mention these guys can get really, really, really big. Here's a professor by the name of David Sullivan, who's really active on social media and Twitter with his handle being Primitive Fishes. Check it out, it's really cool. Everything's about gar on there and other things in these Actinopterygian groups that we've been talking about. But there he is holding an alligator gar, which can get really, really, really big. And there's a lot of conservation concern for them, including because people spearfish for them. And these guys can be really big and have really high reproductive output, and so spearfishing for them is just dumb. Ameiformes, now this is the last of these sort of more primitive Actinopterygians, and it is what that ameiform swimming is named for, which is this undulation of the dorsal fin. You can see it's giving extensive parental care to its babies there, and you can see the undulation of the dorsal fin on the back. They're the only fish that shows locomotion of this form. It's really spectacular. So we're in the Actinopterygian group. We've gone through Polypteriformes, Accipinceriformes, Lepisosteiformes, and Ameiformes. Now we're going to go into this other branch where you have 4 more closely related groups, and we'll go through them one by one. These are the teleosts. Now, this is the vast majority of all species. So you can remember, like, think about it, there were seven gar and gar pikes. There was 1 Ameiformes. So look at the number of species here for teleosts. 23,681 species, give or take. So this is the vast majority of the diversity of fishes here is found in teleosts. The tail is homocircle. Remember, it's the shared, unique, derived feature of them, as well as various aspects of cranial morphology, which are too detailed to tell you about specifically. I should note that in some of these fishes, the tail can be asymmetrical, looking heterocercal, but it's really a question about the fleshy part and the vertebral column and whether it bends up or not. In all of the teleosts, the tail ends in a straight line. It doesn't go up or down into the caudal fin. Okay, so let's talk about some of these major splits here. One is osteoglossomorpha, and so this is from the Vancouver Aquarium, and that's my daughter looking at an arapaima, which is the largest strictly freshwater fish. They get huge, up to 200 kilograms, which is way smaller than the sturgeon, but the sturgeon are not strictly freshwater, the really big sturgeon. But there's a bunch of other cool stuff here. Fish called the bony tongues, weakly electric fishes that generate an electric field around them so they can sense conspecifics. They can attract mates, but they can also detect prey or predators that are moving around them, particularly in murky water. And they have really big brains because they're processing all this electric signal. Knife fishes, elephant noses, arowanas, another really huge predatory freshwater fish, mostly tropical. Okay, here's the Eloposomorpha, or you might see it as a Lopomorpha. 633 species, and they include a bunch of cool things like tarpons in the upper left. That's my brother, and a tarpon that he caught fly fishing. The eels, so there's an American eel in the lower left, and that's my wife who's holding an eel that was caught right outside of our house in Lachine. And it was caught by some local fishermen, and they were just going to kill it. And we were like, oh, let us have a look at it. And so we went over and grabbed it in the kayak and came back and looked at it and set it free. These guys are catadromous. So these guys are actually born in the ocean, in the Sargasso Sea, and then they migrate up into fresh water throughout the northern Atlantic, where they spend most of their life growing in fresh water, and then they go back out to the ocean, to the Sargasso Sea, to reproduce. Now, one of the really distinctive features of this group is what's called the Leptocephalus larvae, which is a very different form of larva from which metamorphosis must occur to get it to the adult form. And there's a Leptocephalus larvae in the lower right. They call them glass eels when they're often migrating up first, like eels are migrating up across weirs into European streams. They're often harvested for food and for fertilizer. They're called glass eels. Here's a bunch of the diversity of Leptocephalus larvae for different types of Eloposomorpha. Just before I taught this class last year, I was in Florida. You saw the gar picture. I also took these pictures of tarpon there. Now the reason why tarpon were right up in close, tarpon get really, really big, is because they often have a relationship with local people who feed them. And then you can pay to get food to feed them to tarpon. Another group here is the Clupiomorpha. These are small anchovy-like fish, anchovies, herring, alewives, shad. They're found in freshwater only, or marine only, or they can be anadromous as well. Again, they're plankton feeders and found in large schools or shoals. So in the upper left is a large school of anchovies. They're avoiding a seal there. I took that picture there. This is a video that corresponds to the time in which that picture was taken in the upper left. This is just sticking a camera underwater. My brother took this video, and you see a bunch of anchovies swimming along, and they're being chased around by sea lions here. But you can also see them filter feeding in the dense plankton here. And there were also humpback whales that were coming in to feed on all these anchovies. One of the world's most hideous foods is called surströmming, or stinky sour herring. And it's a Swedish thing that was developed before there was good ways of refrigerating food. And so they'll put them in cans, and the cans will swell, and they basically become weaponized food. I've had some myself and brought it back here, and my brother's a tough guy, and I fed it to him, and you know, he's like, he took a little bite, and he was like, and you could see that he wanted to spit it out, but he was so tough. And he swallowed it, and he stopped, and he said, "That's the closest I've ever come to throwing up." It's amazing. The cans are so inflated that if you open them up, they'll spray out, and you can smell them for kilometers away. Okay, maybe that's an exaggeration. Hundreds of meters away. There's stories of jokes where in barracks in Sweden or Norway, they will like crack a can at one end of the barracks, and people will be screaming at the other end of the barracks. It smells so bad. Anyway, you can still buy it if you're in Scandinavia. Surströmming. Good.